Florida State running back Trey Benson will be the best value in your dynasty leagues. We will break down his dynasty value, his prospect profile, and more on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also check out our work at Behind the Steel Curtain and Pro Football Focus. On today's show, we're taking a look at Florida State running back Trey Benson, who's widely viewed as RB2 in this class, and maybe even RB1 for most. Kate, what did you see when you watched his tape?
There's a lot to like about Trey Benson. And Marcus, you are going to be absolutely enamored watching him play the game of football. I mean, from a just prospect perspective, he is so explosive. And when he gets to the next level, there's a good chance he's going to have a house call. He's just a very smooth home run hitter. He's got great size and athleticism. He's elusive, but he can play physically. So he doesn't just rely on the ability to miss forced tackles. So that's something he's very good at. He can play physically when he's asked to do so. Some knocks on Trey Benson. He's never had a full-time role in FSU's offense. And he does have a significant injury history. He had a major knee injury in the 2020 season that forced him to miss his the remainder of his freshman year. Didn't see him really take on any role. He spent the first 2 seasons at Oregon before transferring to Florida State. Didn't really see him have any sort of role in Oregon's offense. Word was that he had a little bit of trauma following that knee injury and was looking for a fresh start. So got that fresh start at FSU. And I mean, the tape for Trey Benson is just so fun to watch. For a guy with that kind of size that can play with that level of physicality, just the level of burst is going to have your jaw on the floor.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Trey Benson. We discussed Jonathon Brooks, I believe, on our Tuesday show. Right now, Jonathon Brooks is my dynasty RB1. I think he's most likely to be the first running back off the board. I think he's likely to be the Cowboys pick at 56. And if that's the case, and we talked about this with Matt yesterday, if he lands in Dallas, he should be a top 5, top 6 pick in your super flex drafts. But I actually like Trey Benson's tape better. I like him as a prospect better. I just think his combination of size, speed, power, and what he can do in the receiving game is incredible. Kate, we saw him, I believe it was as a sophomore or as a junior, return a kick 93 yards for a touchdown at Florida State. He's actually the first player in Florida State history to ever return a kick for a touchdown in a home game, which is pretty incredible. We're going to talk about some comps at the end of this show. There's just not many guys that have his size and his speed and are a physical player that don't pan out. He really is the total package.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good plus. There's a lot of, sort of tier 1, tier 2-ish running backs in this class. And you love about, Trey Benson's ability to contribute on special teams, because not all of the running backs in this kind of mid-range tier have had that experience on special teams, which again, it's not the pinnacle to every running back's game, but for, depending on where you're drafted, that is a way that you can get in with the coaching staff and you can see snaps and you can make your way onto the field. It's just another way to be able to do that. And generally speaking, I mean, what you're going to see when you turn on the tape is excellent. there are some questions, I think, generally speaking, about his ability, or, I don't know if it's quote unquote ability or if it's necessarily just kind of the product of the situation there at Florida State, but we never saw him have more than 160 carries in a season. Never seen him have 200 plus touches in the season. And again, I don't necessarily know that that's a knock on him. Florida State really liked their backup running back, so kind of
Yep.
generated touches, which, even for Trey Benson, who was kind of playing in that lead role, just didn't translate to a full-time,
Well,
on the
what's interesting, Kate, is that it can be viewed as a negative and a positive. Like, okay, why weren't you getting more touches in college? Like, were you just not clearly better than the other running backs on your team? I also view it as a positive going into league. He has
fresh legs.
316 carries over the last 4 years. Like, that's nothing. Like, we see running backs all the time go over 300 carries in a single season. So he's going to enter the NFL with under 350 total touches, which is great. That means there's just not a lot of wear and tear on his body other than the knee injury that he had 4 years ago now. I view it as a positive.
And I mean, the good thing is, like, again, that knee injury was in the 2020 season. We have since seen him look, not
Awesome.
even unaffected. Like, you would never guess that he has a knee injury history as significant as he had. Let's talk about his combine, because, one of the guys that I think, did, a little bit of something for that draft stock here at the combine. 4.39 40-second dash, or 40-yard dash, 92nd percentile for the running back position. Didn't impress in the vertical jump, but broad jump just as explosive. 122 inches, 74th percentile. Again, it came in with that height weight combination that you're going to love for a running back. Just over 6 foot tall, 216 pounds. I mean, just a player that I think, tested very well in comparison to what you saw on the tape, unlike in Audric Estime, who will get there, like a guy
hater.
who testing did not translate from maybe what you saw on the field, tested, more poorly than you would have expected. But no, Trey Benson, he checked all the boxes. And I think that's what people are going to be really excited about, because he is so explosive. You know, he's got a lot of elements to his game that I think are going to translate very well to the next level.
Just want to add a little bit more context to the athleticism at the combine. He cut a little bit of weight to try to run faster, which, to his credit, like, running in the 4.3s is awesome. Like, nobody's going to be able to take that away from you now. But he actually plays a little bit closer to 220, 225. At his pro day, measured in at 221. I think that's probably what he's going to be in the NFL. And if that causes you to run a 4.44 or whatever, like, it's not that big of a deal. I don't mind the
That's
size.
the what, 80th percentile for running
Yeah,
backs, like
if you're 220 pounds running in the 4.4s, that's still absolutely incredible. He's got the body type that I really like in a running back, because you look at him, he doesn't look like a 220-pound back. Like, he is shredded, kind
he's
of in the way that,
chiseled.
yeah, he's chiseled, kind of in the way that, like, a Kenneth Walker looked like coming out of Michigan State, who might be a comp later on in the show. I think the athletic testing here is really, really good. I think from an athletic profile, there's not a lot to dismiss here.
No, I think that's definitely the case. And I mean, you saw that athleticism. Like I said, when he gets to the second level, he's probably going to be gone. But like, breakaway runs can be the pinnacle of his game. Kenneth Walker, I think, is an interesting bit, because we saw it, I think breakaway runs are kind of that bread and butter. But I really like Benson in between the tackles. And for a guy coming out that can still stand to gain some experience with a
Yes.
full-time role, I think you have to like what you've seen in, kind of that part-time capacity, which sometimes it can be, challenging to make progress when you're coming on and off the field. And I love what I saw out of Trey
Yeah.
Benson. And I don't, again, kind of struggling to find things and holes in his game.
So as much as we like the athletic testing and as much as we like the tape, the analytic profile is even better. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I have a competitive side. I love playing board games. I love, obviously, football, love fantasy football. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure that you've heard of it before. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. But now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You could team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We want to let you know the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle, which I'm sure you guys are going to appreciate if you're listening to a Locked On Dynasty podcast. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Kay, let's look at the analytic profile from Trey Benson because, again, as good as the tape is and as good as the athletic numbers are, these are even better.
Yeah, I think fans are going to be very excited when they see Trey Benson's profile over the 2022 and 2023 seasons. 96th percentile for PFF rushing grade, 100th percentile for missed forced tackles per attempt. We'll give a little bit more context to that here in a minute. Yards after contact per attempt, 91st percentile, and 100% in fumble rate, like just very reliable in terms of his ball security. Steady receiving. We never saw him really take over FSU's offense in terms of his receiving production. But in his final season, 20 receptions, 227 yards, and a receiving touchdown. And that translated pretty well. 96th percentile in yards per route run for running backs, 57th percentile in terms of PFF receiving grade. Not his calling card, but
No.
it's not a liability, which fans are going to absolutely love for some of that PPR upside.
Yeah, I'll dive into the missed tackles forced per attempt. In PFF charting history when it goes back to college, which I believe is 2013. I'll have to go back and double check.
2014, I believe.
2014. He has the second highest missed tackles forced per attempt for his career, which is 0.39. The only running back that is higher than him is Bijan Robinson at 0.40. So basically, they're right next to each other. This guy excels at making people miss and breaking off arm tackles. You watch his tape, like it's very, very rare when you see the first defender get him down. And that stuff just translates really, really well to the NFL. It's one of the more sticky stats. It's why PFF labels it as a stable metric, because if you can break tackles in college, you're likely going to break tackles in the NFL, especially when you're 220 pounds and you're running the 4.3. So this is a premier tackle breaker with home run speed. Pretty rare combination that we just don't get in the NFL very often.
No, I think, again, one of these prospects that I just love when the tape, the stats, the analytics, and everything come together beautifully and harmoniously. And Trey Benson is one of these prospects. Now, I do think it's interesting to bring a dynasty spin back to this. We talked about Jonathon Brooks on yesterday's show, who obviously coming off the torn ACL, but is, for the purposes of this conversation, our RB1 in Dynasty. Can you give some of our listeners a little bit of context as to what makes Benson different than Brooks and why the gap might not be as far between them as you think?
Well, I think Benson is just the better athlete. And I think you see this on tape. I think Brooks is really smooth. He makes cuts without really ever picking up his feet. I know that sounds
He's
crazy, but that's
he's got the finesse. He's got the
he
finesse factor.
and Benson is a little bit more of height, weight, speed. I'm coming downhill. You better get out of my way, right? That's what makes Benson a little bit more intriguing to me, is that those type of running backs we see have a lot of success in the NFL. He doesn't have maybe the vision that Jonathon Brooks has. I actually trust Brooks a little bit more when it's crowded boxes to find the holes. But if you block things well, I think Brooks has the potential to take it 70, 80 yards. I'm not so sure Brooks can do that. They're both very close. They're both outstanding running backs. I kind of like that Benson's healthy now rather
Yeah.
than Brooks, where we're projecting him to be healthy by August, September, where Benson's, we talked about at the top, he's 4 years removed from his major injury. He's played 16 games over the last 2 years. Or sorry, he started 16 games over the last 2 years. He's played in 26 games. Just give me the guy that's healthier right now.
I think that's very fair. And another, just a couple of some advanced metrics from PFF that I want to shout out before we move on to getting into more of the dynasty discussion here. 96 percentile for breakaway run rate over the past 2 seasons, ranked 10th among 226 qualifying running backs with a 12% breakaway run rate. And
it's pretty good.
Pretty darn good. And again, we talked about that yards after contact per attempt metric, where he ranked in the 91st percentile for running backs over the last 2 seasons. What I think is an interesting contrast to that is the yards before contact per attempt, which 81st percentile. Yards before contact can, be in part due to offensive line and that aspect of the game, that like running back is a position that's very dependent on blocking schemes and offensive line capability and production. And, the fact that Trey Benson didn't have as much room behind the line of scrimmage, but excelled as much as he did after the point of contact, I think tells you pretty much everything you need to know about Trey Benson and whether he can succeed at the next level.
Just real quick to compare and contrast Brooks and Benson again. I think if you're looking for more of a home run hitter, it's Benson. But if you're looking for the guy that can kind of consistently churn out 4, 5, 6 yard runs, I actually think it's probably Brooks. I think Brooks is the better pass blocker right now. And I think Brooks is the better receiver, but Benson's the better athlete that just gives your offense a little bit more juice. I think the landing spot's going to be really important here to see which one has a better career. But I don't want to make it sound like I don't like one of these guys and I love the other. I think they're both outstanding backs. I just prefer Benson a little bit more in a vacuum. We'll see how the landing spot impacts their dynasty value.
Yeah, I think very fair.
All right, let's get to Trey Benson's dynasty value and let's get to some player comps, which I love. I know, Kate, you struggle with player comps. So that's okay. Not everybody loves player comps. I know that sometimes it's really hard to find good ones. I think I got 2 good ones here that I can't wait to reveal to you. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. When it comes to the financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and the data you need in one place. They are the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401ks and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors. And it's also how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users every month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. Again, the number one financial destination. That is yahoofinance.com. Again, yahoofinance.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are breaking down Florida State running back Trey Benson. Kate, did you have any comps that came to mind when you watched him?
I don't, but I hear you have a couple of good ones that I am on the edge of my seat to hear.
So he reminds me, this is fun. He reminds me of a combination of two running backs that actually came out in the 2022 draft. I think he's pretty similar to Kenneth Walker, but I think his body looks a little bit like Breece Hall, both of whom are very, very good running backs. I think he's probably a little bit closer to Kenneth Walker, who went middle of round 2. I kind of think Benson gets drafted somewhere in that range, middle round 2, end of round 2. But I think he could have a Kenneth Walker type career in the NFL.
I love that comp. I think, like, for me, what really does it is that sort of breakaway run capability, and that ability to take any ball to the house is definitely something that resonates with the Kenneth Walker mold. Both incredible athletes, both just having that speed and that breakaway capability are going to give you RB1 upside on pretty much any week that they're touching a football. Hopefully, we don't see Trey Benson come into a situation where he's relegated to another one of these part-time roles here in the NFL. But I think with the draft capital, you have to project that he's probably going to land in a situation where he's going to take on a significant role within a respective offense.
The reason why the Breece Hall comp makes a lot of sense for me is the measurables. Breece Hall coming out of Iowa State, 5'11", 217 pounds. So that's almost a near match. We're in a 4.39 40-yard dash, exactly what Trey Benson did with a 1.54 10-yard split. I think his body looks a lot like Breece Hall. I'm not sure he has quite as much wiggle as Breece Hall did, but I think it really matches what Kenneth Walker did, where, again, you block this thing right and he's gone, and he can give you a little bit of power to help you move piles. I think those are both great players, and if he can be anything like either of those guys, it's going to be a successful second-round pick. But where is his dynasty value right now?
Right now, you mentioned it, I think, earlier in the show here, currently ranking as the RB2 in this rookie class, which I think is spot on. And I do think that, as we alluded to in our previous segment, I don't think the gap between Benson and Brooks is all that significant, right? Honestly, but depending on landing spot, you could look at these guys as A1 and A, or 1A and 1B. Like, I really think that both of them have a lot to offer. Both of them could come into a full-time role, but Trey Benson, as you mentioned, because he's healthy now, maybe he should be closer to RB1 than RB2 at this point in dynasty consensus rankings.
I think talent-wise, he is. I am a little bit worried about where he lands, because if you look at like the consensus board and you look at where some of the more NFL draft experts are having him ranked, it's a little bit lower. It's like in the 70s or the 80s, where Jonathon Brooks is being drafted, in the 50s. I think Jonathon Brooks is going to land in a situation where he is a clear-cut RB1 from the get-go. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case for Trey Benson. We'll see. I think he's going to have – we'll see on his draft capital. I think it's a little bit more fluid than what Jonathon Brooks is, and that's what makes me nervous. If he goes to a situation where he's a part-time player or he's in a backfield with another well-established running back, maybe we never see him be a full workload running back that's getting 18 to 20 touches a game. I'm a little bit nervous that way, but I think he's going to be a value in your dynasty leagues, because I just think he's straight up a better player than Jonathon Brooks.
Okay, of the 4 teams that have had top 30 visits with Trey Benson, which are the Cowboys, the Giants, the Bills, and the Browns, I'm going to say he gains value in all but one of those. right? Like
Yeah, Buffalo's the
Cowboys
one.
smash,
Yeah.
Cowboys smash, Giants smash, Browns smash.
Yeah.
Bills is the only question mark because of the presence of James Cook, which again, kind of surprised that they've done as much work on the running back position as they have this offseason, because there wasn't really a ton to dislike about James Cook's game unless you're just looking for a bigger and more physical type of player, if that's the kind of offense you're going to execute. Benson would definitely fit that profile of more of that kind of power back, whereas James Cook, like his calling card's going to be the more of the finesse aspect of the running back position. I think like most landing spots, do you agree? Like 3 out of those 4 would be
Yeah. Of those 4,
wins.
I think at least 2 of those are smashed, and the Giants is a little bit more like, I think his value stays about the same. I'm worried about the Bills. I think if you were to ask me going into the show where his most likely destination is, I think it's Buffalo. Buffalo has done a ton of work on Trey Benson. I think they really like the idea of pairing Benson and Cook together and being a more physical running team, using these 2 guys to maybe help their defense out a little bit. I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, but it
It would be a
seems like
nightmare for fantasy football
it would
managers.
be an absolute nightmare for fantasy football. I think the Bills are trying to shift how they want to play offense. We'll see. I think we're going to know a lot more at this time. Well, I guess on Friday, we'll figure out where Benson's going to land. But I really, really like the talent. I could see him being the first running back drafted in our dynasty leagues. You don't have to squint too hard to see it.
Yeah, overall dynasty value, we talked about his standing as the RB2, the consensus RB2 in this class, behind Jonathon Brooks. But I did want to shout out his overall dynasty value, which right now, heading into the draft, Trey Benson being drafted as RB23,
Steal.
which I think it feels like a steal. So some of the names he's being drafted behind: Javonte Williams, RB17;
Get out of
Najee
here.
Harris, RB19;
Get out of here.
Zamir White, Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson. I would take
How
Trey
old is Joe
Benson,
Mixon again?
87.
Yeah, that's exactly. That
I think he's
one's
27, but
asinine.
it feels like he's 87 and he plays like he's 87. So like Trey Benson over Joe Mixon, and I would swap them straight up right now. Like if you miss out on Trey Benson in your rookie drafts, I'm gonna go ahead and just slide into the DMs of the Joe Mixon manager and say, like, let's do a 1-for-1.
I
Because I
would give
think
up
people
picks.
are
I would give up picks to give away by Joe Mixon to go get Trey Benson. Here's my prediction, Kate. By the time we get out of the draft, that Monday when you and I are talking about the prospects after the draft, Trey Benson will be a top 15 running back by then. And I don't even know if I think he'll be closer to 10 than 15.
wow. All right. Well, I'm excited because we've been very bullish on these top 2 running backs. I do think, like, for the fact that this is not a good running back class, I think there's a number of other names that could emerge as potential starters here in the NFL.
Okay.
Again, there's no prospect in this class that comes out with a completely clean profile. Jonathon Brooks would have been that guy, I think, as the most well-rounded prospect if it weren't for that ACL. Trey Benson, we're doing a little bit of projection, right, with the fact that he hasn't necessarily had a full-time role in the offense. There's some other projections we have to make, but again, like there are several guys in this class that I think have the potential to emerge as full-time running backs. We'll see how this all pans out, and we will have their landing spots very
Yes.
soon to see how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, I really like the top 2 running backs. The third running back in this class, I'm not as high on, Kate, and I just don't see it. We're gonna discuss Tennessee running back Jalen Wright on Friday's show. That might be a little bit of a wet blanket show. So make sure you guys tune in. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.